tonight to Anwar Cafe, where the Interreligious Task Force and Cleveland Peace Action are bringing together this panel on Salvador and Solidarity that is tentatively called Guilty Until Proven Innocent. We are grateful to have incredible co-sponsors. The CIS, the Centro de Intercambio y Solidaridad. Hey, Evelyn, we love you. COAR Peace Mission, the Casa de Oscar Arnolfo Romero in Zaragoza, as well as U.S. El Salvador sister cities, and who am I missing? International Partners in Mission, which hopefully they're going to be sending someone to join us online. But if not, that's okay. We'll work with what we've got here. I'm C. Stonebaker Martinez. I'm the co-director of the Interreligious Task Force on Central America and Colombia. I see a lot of friends here in the audience and online. But just a quick refresher that we were founded in 1980 by people who were working in Latin America on other solidarity issues, and people who knew and loved Jean Donovan and Dorothy Kazel, Maura Clark and Ida Ford, the women from here in Cleveland and New York who were killed in El Salvador in 1980 by U.S. trained and funded forces. People alive who remember them today remember that their work was really all about what it means to be an ally or accomplice before we had that language for it. They were deeply committed to solidarity, and I think that their work transformed from the charity mindset that this empire imposes on us into a beautiful expression of solidarity that we are honored to continue the legacy of. I myself am Colombian and Appalachian, and those are the waterways that, those places creating the waterways that have brought me here to this place in my life, and I'm so grateful for this community and the ways that it has transformed my life toward collective liberation, and I'm sure all of you have felt some of that or experienced some of that. Tonight, I'm really grateful to be accompanied by some beautiful friends here. We have Dr. Carlos Julio Ponte, retired chief rheumatologist for the Cleveland Clinic and coordinator of care in at the Ancianato in Boa Vista, and who just does incredible work. He has like more jobs now in retirement than he did when he was working full time for the clinic. And to my right, your left, the incredible Susan Barnish, program director for COAR Peace Mission. Lived in El Salvador from 2014 to 2018 and was recently there to see friends and family. And all the way on your left, my right, is Erica Ewing, Goshen College graduate, former IRTF fellow from 2016 to 2018, I think, and recent returnee from the CIS delegation to El Salvador. So we're so grateful that you're all with us.
If you want to use Victoria.
Oh, incredible. And Vicki Jimenez is on the line. Hey, Vicki. From International Partners in Mission. She's the director of education and immersion experience programs. We're so grateful to have you here, Vicki. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, cool, thank you. I'm going to be looking up a little bit at you, Vicki, because you're on a screen above our panel. We're so grateful to see you and have you here with us. And Mary is good to go to get us introduced, yes? So I am so grateful to also introduce Mary Over, the person I was, or the organization I was forgetting, Ready Fair Trade, that works with cooperatives in El Salvador. Mary helped me to put this put this event on tonight, And sadly, her train broke down in Chicago, so she has to join us virtually as well. But Mary, I'm so grateful that you can be here right now to share your words. I'm gonna pause to turn it over to you.
Mary's video is not currently on, but we can hear Mary's voice in a second.
There, okay, I turned mine on. I turned it on now. Thank you. Okay, welcome. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? All right, good. Somebody's hearing me. Okay, I'm just going to read quickly what I was hoping to say. This topic of this discussion is really close to my heart. When my late husband, Ron, established Revy Fair Trade in 2009, we began relationships with the artisan families that continue even today. But in April this year, when I went down to El Salvador for the first time after the pandemic, I saw that even worse than the pandemic, this was nothing compared to what they're going through right now with the Bukele government's state of exception that began in March of last year. My first day on the ground, my longtime colleague Leslie there took me to the Isla Espiritu Santo, an island off the coast in the east of the country, and that island's residents had no gang activity, but even so, even though the local police knew that because they'd been working with them for years, the government required a quota from every community be arrested. So there were 22 innocent people taken from that island. And I heard testimony that day from one of those people. It was a man who had just gotten out from after 8 months in prison, during which he had lost 40 kilos of weight, eating the daily ration of food that he could pinch with the fingers of one hand. And then 2 sons of our longtime artisans in another community were taken, both completely innocent of any gang affiliation. One was crossing a park to get his hair cut, and the other one was returning to his wife and baby after bathing in the river in their community. His mother was told, don't ask about him again until after December. December, he might be dead by then, because the gang members can survive in the prisons and not the innocent. In another community, the artisan co-op we've worked with for years has seen every artisan they had trained and guided after getting them out of the gangs 15 to 20 years before, swept up into the prisons with little chance of getting out. Thank you for coming. This is important, and not enough is known here of how bad it is there. Thank you.
Can I make a quick announcement about, I want to make a quick announcement about how audio is going to work with the virtual participants. We need some time to switch between people talking virtually and people talking in this room. So FYI, both for people here and for those of you online, that we will just need to take about 5 seconds in between changing the audio.
Thank you. Mary, it's so wonderful to have you here with us in this way. Technology is amazing. Thank you for collaborating with me to get this project off the ground. So there's a lot going on in El Salvador. There have been 72,000 people incarcerated since the state of exception was put into place in March of 2022, March 27th. What is a state of exception? A golpe de estado. No, that's not what it is. Thank you. That's not what it is. Estado de excepción is, it's also been indefinite since March 27th, but a state of exception is like military law or military rule or martial law over the country. Right now, about 2% of the population is incarcerated, and this is about to surpass surpassing the United States' incarceration rate. So to make it the most highly incarcerated population in the world. There's indefinite pre-trial detention. There have been mass trials. This is something we've seen actually in the United States as well with migrants. Down in Tucson, for instance, where Operation Streamline would process 60 to 100 migrants within the course of 1 hour. Each person would get less than a minute for their trial to see whether or not they were able to legally request asylum or be denied refuge. And police have admitted that there are quotas that they're trying to fill to fill these prisons. And the police have also admitted that at least 20% or 20,000 people are completely innocent and they're just filling their quotas. And so we have a lot, going on in this country, and I think that we can all feel and see many similarities. I think that there's that we can think back to the years between 2017 and 2020 here, where incarceration continued to rise pretty significantly, and fascism continued to rise pretty significantly. That this comes at a cost. This idea of safety, and we know that these issues are intersecting. They are about environmental justice, racial justice, gender justice, migrant justice, and more. And so we want to just get a sort of sense of what's happening on the ground, and let's have a frank and public conversation about what it looks like to take care of each other, what it looks like to be in solidarity, what it looks like to really find and feel safe. And what does that word safety really mean? So we're going to start with Vicki from International Partners in Mission, because she is on the ground, and we can go ahead and take Mary off of the panel screen. And Vicki, just introduce yourself, please. Tell us a little bit about your work and anything you want to share to let us start grounding ourselves in your context. Thank you.
Okay, I think I left enough time, right? Just making sure. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for letting me join you today. I will apologize in advance, because just like Mary was sharing, this is such an important topic for me, and I can see how people that even I work with have been affected by it, and it's really hard to discuss this even in the country. So, well, first of all, just to let you know, usually I go by Vicky, not regularly by Victoria, just so you know. I usually say this. If you're mad at me, you can call me Victoria, of course. If not, you can call me Vicky at all times. I've been working at IPM, International Partners in Mission, for 4 years now, and my main role is directing the immersion experience program, and you'll see why I'm mentioning this in a bit. This program, it's an international, I would say, traveling/learning program. So our idea is to create bridges, to create connection from people that are in the United States that travel to the places, to the countries that we work in, so that they can know the reality from the people, not the touristic reality, not the things that you're going to see online, the pretty hotels and all that. We get the people from the States to meet the partners, the project partners that we work with, or the international fellows. So you get to see how these people are living the reality. We actually just had an immersion tour here in El Salvador. I think it was in July, with a youth group from a church, and it was quite interesting to have so many young people being interested in things that sometimes people here don't want to see, don't want to admit, or that they just plainly ignore. So I think I was asked, and if I'm not mistaken, to share a little bit how this set of exception in the country has improved the security as well in many parts of the country, but has sadly impacted the life of innocent people. So I would like to start by saying, because a lot of people, you will hear a lot of people saying this, saying, well, this is a complex reality. That's a euphemism, and that's, of course, an understatement. Yes, it's true. It is true that it is complex, but also it's something that a lot of people want to ignore. From what I have seen and from the reality that way that a lot of the people that I work with actually are.
So, but now we're speaking.
Sorry.
Hey, Vicky, I'm sorry, you froze and we are having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry.
We're gonna
Can you
pass
hear
it back over to you again because it looks like your video is back on.
You froze for about a minute. Does anybody remember where she left off?
Oh.
Yeah, after she said that for some, it's improving security, and then she goes.
I
Did you catch
apologize.
that? When you
Sometimes
said it's
For
improving
some,
security.
it's improving security, dot, dot, dot.
But the reality is,
sorry. Okay, can you hear me now? But you can hear me now, right? Yes. Okay. Sorry. No, as I was saying, this is, well, yes, I was saying that saying it's a complex reality, it's a euphemism, but it's also an understatement. And I was sharing, while I have lived somehow with some privilege, because I do have some education and I'm bilingual and da 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 da, I have also been part of a group that it's not privileged. I have always traveled by bus, which in these countries is saying a lot. I work in the communities, in these impoverished communities, just like Mary was mentioning, and you can actually get to hear some horrible stories from people. So here's what I can share with you. It's the middle class and the upper class. And I'm not gonna say the upper class, it's the upper class, because I wouldn't say there is a middle class anymore in El Salvador. There's a working class and there's an upper class. It's the upper class, the one that has been truly benefited from the state of exception. And in reality, these people have always been benefited from any political decision that has been made in this country. And I'm mentioning this because these people are not the ones that are living in any of the impoverished communities that I work in at all. You will get to see, if you ever come to El Salvador, you would get to see which are the areas that used to have gang members or that are more impoverished and which are not. And you will see that those two, even though they can be side by side, they don't mix at all. It was the population that travels by bus, the one that was always harmed by gang members. It was the population that lives in these impoverished communities, the one that was always harassed and suffering violence by gang members. It was the people that you saw selling on the streets, the ones that were suffering that violence, not the people, or not necessarily the people from the upper class. Now, because the people from the upper class have more means of reaching out to the public, because they are the ones that own media, this message of being safe, of the country being one of the safest now in Latin America, which is a lie, is spread and it is believed. Because here, if you're, and I would say anywhere, but if you say something over and over and over again, even though it's a lie, it will be believed. Now, on the other hand, just like Mary was saying, you will hear stories of people being taken to prison, and this is going to sound horrible, but that's what it is, because they are brown skinned, because they are thin, and because they look poor, because they live in a poor area, because they live in an impoverished community. I have heard at least 2 to 3 stories in this year of people that live in an impoverished community and the police taking them just because they look suspicious. And the thing is that they sold the lie that in the state of exception, just some rights were the ones that were going to be taken away. But that's not true. You are not allowed to defend yourself. That saying of you're guilty, that you should be innocent until proven the contrary, that's not true. Here you're guilty because the police says you're guilty. and that's it. There is no way in which you can defend yourself. There is no way in which your family can reach out and know what's going on with you. I have, and because of security reasons, I won't share a lot about this. I will be very general, but I have heard a story of a woman that was in prison, and her testimony sounds exactly of how people would be tortured in the civil war, in the civil conflict. It's going beyond horrible, beyond heartbreaking. It's something that you can't believe people can survive at all. And having the state of exception allows the government to do whatever they please without being accountable for it. We no longer have an institution for the access to public information. They took that away. And if you ever start asking questions or a simple visit that it's your right as a citizen, you can be pinpointed in a very, very bad way. Everyone that is working now in nonprofit organizations and in human rights organizations are a target to the government. And you are labeled as someone that is working with the gangs. If you are part of the academia, you are also attacked. You are under a huge attack. My alma mater and the place where I live close to, it's constantly under scrutiny by the government. Every single organization that stands for human rights cannot have their phones near them because they know they are being observed and listened and spied on. It's something that it's truly scary, and you fear for the lives of those that are close to your heart if, like I said, they look like they could be in a gang, and that's a very arbitrary way of thinking. And I would say the other thing that adds up to it is that we are, in fact, a very racist community, even though people believe we're not. And if they have to pinpoint someone as being a gang member, again, it will be someone with brown skin, not someone with white skin. To add to that, you add that we are classist as well. So because someone looks poor, now you're already targeting them as a gang member. You can see, I identified so much with what Mary said, because those are the stories that you're listening from the people in the communities. They are coming from English classes, they are coming from their school, they're coming from work, and they come late because they have to be earning their lives or earning their education somehow outside. And just because they are living in a place where there used to be gangs, or where people think there were gangs, they are being attacked. I have heard a testimony of someone that was beaten by the police so badly they had to go to the hospital. And there was no one, absolutely no one, to be accountable for that. That's the reality we're living. While at the same time, you're probably seeing on the internet, we're the safest country now, and that there is Surf City, and that we have all this tourism. That comes at a price, at the price of the human rights of those who have always been forgotten and have always been excluded, and that now are even more excluded and systematically excluded. I think I'm gonna stop right here. If not, I could go on and on and on. I know it's just a little time that I have. So yeah, I hope that was enough. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Honestly. The reality, your own lived experience. We're honored to be in relationship with you, and grateful to Deb Corner for suggesting that you join us in our panel. You're really grounding us in the present and in what is real. So I'm gonna just bring out a few more things that I've heard and that IRTF has tracked through our rapid response network, and then turn it over to our panelists and our audience for questions. According to Crystal Saul and the Sector Jurídico Humanitario organization, in this month, since the state of exception was started, over 180 people have died in prison Crystal Sal has tracked that at least 84 of those deaths were extremely violent, and at least 52 of those deaths occurred because of medical neglect. Fewer than 1% of the people who have been imprisoned are accused of a violent crime. So that's a pretty staggering number. And none of the people who have died were ever convicted of a crime. So we think about, you mentioned that other countries are praising the crackdowns, and some people are saying that they feel that it's safer, and we're asking about safety, and we're asking about at what cost. The cost that we understand is constitutional rights are being given up to make us feel safer, but that might be a false sense of security. So constitutional rights we're talking about include due process, freedom of association, the right to presumption of innocence, the right to counsel, and no search and seizures. We know in the mass incarceration, the movement to end mass incarceration, that stop and frisk is a very violent practice of law enforcement, and often targets, as you have said, racialized and class groups. We also, US El Salvador Sister Cities is one of our partners tonight, and they've been supporting the Santa Marta 5, the water protectors who, are part of this legacy. In El Salvador, if you don't already know, 97% of the water is not potable, and that is because of decades and decades of mining. Over 10 years ago now, the people of El Salvador, grassroots communities, movements, they used capita actually to like sort of overturn mining in their country, and then the country tried, who was it? Multinational corporations were trying to sue the country so that they could continue to extract from the land and continue to pollute the water. And Bukele has been actually reversing these mining bans that have made it more possible for the environment to heal. The Santa Marta 5, they're now under house arrest, so they are home, but they're not free. And we also know that there's been an increase in militarization in historically organized areas. So what we're hearing from partners like you, Vicki, is that roundups are masking the targeting of social movements and political dissidents. And that's happening alongside neoliberal tech investment from US dominant companies like Google, and from cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, as well as investments from China, not just in El Salvador, but in neighboring regions as well. So we know that our struggles must be rooted locally in the grassroots communities, and also internationally connected, right? Because we all experience the same systemic oppression. And so we have to understand that what affects one affects all of us, regardless of our positionality and the privilege that we may hold based on our skin color or our employment status or our marital status or what have you. Current President Bukele has unprecedentedly consolidated power and plans to run for a second term in Congress, which is legally questionable. And we know that he has been pushing the diversion of geothermal energy resources toward Bitcoin mining. So there's a lot going on, and this has really wide and deep impact. So I want to ask everyone, given all of this context, we'll start with, how has the current context on the ground really impacted you and your work and the communities that you work with or the communities that you've been visiting? And I will start with Julio, and then whoever can follow.
Well, this was one of my many trips to El Salvador. I haven't been since since pandemic. And we had a delegation for the 30th anniversary of SEAS, which I have worked before. And yes, one of my favorite places to visit in El Salvador is Isla Espiritu Santo. And I had asked during pandemic, we were going to have a delegation, and I had asked Steve tried to go, and they said yes, we were going, and then this time it was a given that we were going. I know these people very well. It's a very nice community because they have promoted the filters for water, so the kids are not dying of diarrhea and infections. They have a garden, community gardens that will be help. And it's extremely peaceful. They live out of fishing, and the women organize and they have a cooperative, which is amazing. They make jewelry and candy. And as we could say, they have never had any gangs because it's the most incredibly peaceful community. But then, yes, they still have 3 members that are in prison. And we saw one, the one I think the same one that she's talking about, that was let go after 8 months. Again, nobody was ever charged of anything, and no explanation of why they were taken, and no explanation for him why he was taken or why he was let go. But yes, it's true that he lost 40 kilos. He's 80 pounds. He's the skin and bones. And that is the rule because, yes, if you are weak, not giving you food, then it can be easier to control. The other woman that was let go, and she was actually our motor taxi driver.
Sandra,
Oh yes.
the mother of one of the scholarship students.
Yes. Yes. And there's a lot of connection again, and it's not only the Espiritu Santo, but many of the communities that SEAS has helped have come through very, very little investment with the scholarships and the communities. But yes, Sandra was the co also without an explanation. Her partner is still in jail, and nobody knows why or she's ever going to let go. And one of the things, these people, I have met them before many of the students that were in the scholarship program, which have changed the island in so many ways. One thing that I like about that place, again, so many things that are nice, but they're not resentful. And it's like, wow, after all these, then it's like, so what did happen? We have to keep trying to survive. And the cooperative is working, and SEAS promotes a lot of the things that they are making. Mostly candy because the jewelry and the dresses that they were making, they haven't had any raw materials to make them since. Yeah, the other part that I one of the delegates is somebody that I know very well, and you know, Marvin.
Yeah.
And he was one of the delegates. He lives in, there is part that nobody has talked yet. There is a state, Cabañas, which is one of the biggest states of El Salvador, has been militarized. And it's closed, nobody can get in or out. And he lives in Cabañas. And I have asked him before, before I went, and I said, well, how is it? And he said, I cannot tell you. And yes, all the funds are taken, and are capped, and we talk about that, and they say yes, we don't discuss anything on the phone, or even say, it's pretty hard or whatever, but they just say, I will talk to you. Yes.
In person.
In person. And that is the same thing with people in the Espírito Santo. And the Comunidad Romero, we visit Comunidad Romero. And that was more of because they have people taken from all the communities. But this was more positive music, because the students just put a show of how to relate with younger students. And it was really, really very nice. But yes, that's in essence. One thing that I was remembering, and I feel in Colombia, probably then when Uribe, who was a president that changed the constitution to be re-elected, had the democratic security. And that was a program to make people safe, feel safe. That he created the falsos positivos, which was they had the police and the army had quotas of guerrillas that had to be killed, and they kidnapped people from the lower classes and keep them adrenaline in that. And finally, everybody knew that finally there is some type of trial that is happening, but this is probably not. But it's very similar, because you were not taken, you were killed, and then it was because of quota to have the full sense of security. That's basically what it's saying.
Thank you. Susan or Erica, do you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your own worker perspective?
I can jump on just because I went to the same places as Julio. So I got to go to the same places as Julio, but this was my first trip to El Salvador. And I was nervous before I went, not for my safety, but more because I'm easily emotionally affected by listening a little louder. Okay, I'm easily emotionally affected by people's stories and things. It's gonna happen again, so I apologize. But something that still sticks with me is to remember the mental health of the people in these situations, because we often call them resilient and strong and all these things, and these are mothers whose children are locked up without knowing if they'll ever see them again. And the people who work in the human rights organizations, and Vicky, and I'm sure all these people who hear these stories every day, it's hard sometimes because here we're so comfortable, or we're not, some of us, but we can kind of look away from situations, and for them it's their reality is that, and so many of the women and people we met now have to take on other jobs. They're elderly women because their child was taken and they were the ones who provided for the family, and they have no way, and the cost of food there is going up so much, and so they're struggling just to purchase the necessities they have for their life. And it's just for me to keep in perspective, to focus on their well-being. They face so many traumas of war and gangs and the violence, and now the violence of this state. It's amazing, and I know they find strength in their community, and that's how they keep going, is through those outlets. But I try to remind myself that, like, every time you hear this story of one person, and that's their whole world, that is sort of, again, upside down, and to try to remember that. So I was very moved by meeting all these wonderful people, and just want to bring their energy to this space too. And thank you for having me.
So COAR is a school and residential foster care home. So the children that we work with in many cases, we aren't seeing a direct impact on their communities because those children are not in the community, they're with us. But Erica, I think you made a really good point about mental health and about the community writ large, because you now have a whole generation of children that is growing up in an environment in which the government can basically do whatever it wants. Parents or friends or siblings are disappearing, and our director, who works directly with the kids in the home, is really concerned about what those kids are going to carry forward, what trauma they've already experienced and what trauma they will take out with them into the world. When we look at the effects of the Civil War, and how that has affected folks who are, in their 40s and 50s, this is a totally different situation with some very similar repercussions. So I think that's one thing that we need to be concerned about as well. Like I said, we don't have a lot of stories of direct community interactions at COAR, but of course, everyone knows someone or knows of someone that has been wrongfully incarcerated, for sure. Those stories are out there. And I would have to add that people that we've talked to in our travels, Salvadorans that are back and forth, do feel safer. But you're right. What is the cost of that safety? And how do you balance out, 90% of the country versus 10% of the country that feels safer, and 90% is wrongfully incarcerated and living in fear of perhaps being wrongfully incarcerated. So.
Thank you for saying that. I'm realizing that more things are coming up for me of the connections that exist across Abya Yala, what Norteños call Turtle Island, here as the indigenous name, South Americans and Central Americans frequently call the entire continent Abya Yala, and across Abya Yala, we're experiencing similarities. So here in the county jail, just last week, Elving Lopez died because of medical neglect. This is the 25th person to die in the Cuyahoga County Jail since 2018. And so this type of carceral violence and this mindset of carcerality, this idea that punishment and control can manage a society and a people into submission, rather than asking people, why are petty crimes committed? Why were gangs exported from the United States? Why would someone join an organized crime group? Well, it's because their resources are not being met, right? So we have to unravel the curtain and pull back the threads of confusion around a lot of this violence, and never get too comfortable. Thank you, Erica, for reminding us of this resiliency piece. My friends and family in Colombia tell me that hope is my duty when I am, especially when I'm far away from them, that I am mandated to maintain hopefulness on their behalf, when it feels like there's nothing else I can do. But you're right, it's really challenging to remain resilient. That also takes energy and effort. And it makes me think of currently the criminalization of environmental defenders in Atlanta here in the United States. The fact that the Defend the Forest movement to stop Cop City has had the most egregious criminalization that I have ever seen in my lifetime here in the United States of peaceful civil disobedience and action is just really, really challenging. And being deeply involved in that movement and understanding what it's like to accompany environmental defenders who are persecuted for their work, and now knowing that there has been a persecution here in the United States of an environmental defender, the first since colonial genocide, accompanying people who are facing those RICO charges within that movement reminds us always of the importance of mental health. And not just like, well, we have a lack of access to mental health care right here in this country, but in many other places as well. And not just the type of mental health that says like, okay, this is a you problem, it's an individual problem, but rather that post-traumatic stress comes from being part of unhealed society. It comes from being part of a society that is rife with systemic oppression, and accompanying these criminalized people reminds us that we have to, continue to have faith, and that we have to think about how this trauma lives within our bodies, that it lives within the way that we breathe. This is something that Julio has taught me at the Ancianato many times, just the way that we, the things that we ingest, right? The way that we relate to each other, whether or not Mike was coming in earlier, we're thinking about our frustration with power brokers within our community, and we need to remember not to become filled with hate at the hate that is perpetuated against us. So all of these things are swirling in my head, and I hope that made any little bit of sense. I have some questions that I want any of the four of you to answer, or Zulma from Sister Cities or Evelyn from CEAS, if you would like to jump in at any time, just please let us know. I'm wondering if
As we move into the questions, we're going to pass around our petition to decriminalize, drop the false criminal charges against the Santa Marta Five. It's an international campaign that we've been working on with U.S., El Salvador, Sister Cities, and CISPIS, and other organizations. And as C mentioned earlier, this wide casting of the net in ostensibly to control crime and make the streets safer is also a way of the government of masking its targeting of social movement leaders. And in this case, a very specific agenda of wanting to wind back the will of the people that was shown in 2017 when El Salvador became the first country in the world to ban open pit metallic mining. And now this government wants to reinstate the extractive industries. So I'm going to pass this around.
And this is a new version of our petition.
Right,
since
an
they've
updated version.
been released.
They're released, but under house arrest, they're still facing trial. And when you think about the tens of thousands of people incarcerated, and a judge ruled that these particular five could be released, it's only because of the large attention that's been brought on their case, this egregious case, like so many other egregious cases, because of international solidarity efforts. You do not have to be a registered voter in Cuyahoga County. The Secretary of State is not going to check these petition signatures. This is our petition that's going directly to the State Department and our members of Congress. I'm going to start with Sheila, because I know you already signed it, you can pass it this way, and I'll put in the information flyers I would encourage you to take with you as the petition passes. Thank you very much.
Of course, yes. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if anyone can make any comments about the fact that poverty has been increasing and deepening over the last 10 years. which like kind of flies in the face of this like false sense of safety, of course. So I'll leave that on the table to see who wants to pick that question up first.
So really, what was striking, the first person I talked to on an airplane was going to Colombia, their home, and their first thing was, oh, we need a Bukele. And they were so happy to talk about Bukele and how safe and how wonderful the country is going to be. And as a part of maybe any authoritarian regime, they're promising you a small window of time where they promise some safety or something that they think is benefiting people, and they create this image that it's good, but it's an artificial lowercase piece that's not going to last, and it doesn't address any of the root causes. So the poverty is still there. They've locked up 70,000 people, but the children in the community still don't have an opportunity for a job or anything in the future. So there's no plan of development. It's just a shallow, I don't even want to say band-aid, I don't know what it is, but it's just an image player so that he can continue to maintain power, which is what he's trying to do. And as Vicky said, the rich continue to maintain their class, and the poor, it just keeps widening.
Yeah, and certainly the pandemic didn't help, and inflation, and you're right, food costs are going up.
And maybe, do either of you have a perspective on cryptocurrency and geothermal energy resources going to Bitcoin mining? Because that, I think, is rounding the wealth gap. It's from my perspective when I was in San Salvador in December.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about the geothermal part of things, but certainly the average Salvadoran does not understand what a Bitcoin is.
I think the average US person does.
Yeah, the bono that they gave out when they started the Chivo wallet and everything, you know, many people committed fraud and people didn't actually get their bonus. Many people like downloaded the app, converted it to dollars and spent it because they just needed that money like right now as cash to buy food or to pay their electric bill. And I don't, it's kind of a tourist like, cool, oh, I can go to El Salvador and I can use Bitcoin at the beach, but I don't think you find very many average Salvadorans using Bitcoin. So.
Because everything is connected, I have another connection, and then we're gonna pass it to online because there's either a question or a comment around this topic. Which is, this has been also an issue in Puerto Rico, as many people know. There were a lot of investors who tried really hard to make Bitcoin beaches a thing at the expense of, you know, the indigenous people and the people who have lived there for a really long time. I will turn it over.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Perhaps just to add to what all of you are saying right now, and I'm going to go in order because I'm going to forget. I think you were talking a little bit about also that generational trauma, and I would say that societal trauma. And also you were, you know, mentioning about how the average Salvadoran would also perhaps not be as invested in thinking about what is the root cause of the gangs. I personally, and again, this comes from a very personal place, as a professional, I was trained to ask myself that question. Why, and from a very social psychology perspective, why are people joining gangs? That's the question that we have to ask. And it's so many things at the same time. It's not having jobs, not having access to education, being part of a corrupt, or being in a corrupt system, in a corrupt government. And adding to that, there is just a scar, not just from our civil war, but also I would say a scar that we carry, and it's I love that you, and I don't want to say love, but I think the use of the word trauma that you did was so important, because this also comes, at least in my eyes, from even a colonial heritage that we have, that someone else is going to come and give that solution to us because we should put our hands down, not speak up, not demand rights, and not ask questions. Because when you start asking questions, it gets uncomfortable for those who are up, right? So if you take that trauma, now that more recent trauma, I would say also that we have from our civil war that just ended in 92, that a lot of things were not resolved. We know we had a peace agreement and we signed the peace and all that, but there was no help for victims of the war, for direct or indirect victims of the war. And this emotional scar, it's still carried through today. You can see why this man is now in power, because he knew how to play with people's emotions. And again, this comes from a very personal place, a very personal opinion. He knew how to tell and how to play with that people's trauma, with that people's probably need of vengeance, because they haven't had the opportunity to work that trauma, because they were still, even after the war, they were still abandoned by the government. They were still abandoned by all of the society that need to create agrarian reforms, to create educational reforms, so many other things that were forgotten. And now I would even add the other thing that, and I forgot to mention this in the beginning, in our Salvadoran history, the military as an institution were our aggressors. And a lot of people were, and I'm sorry because I'm going to say a very, very harsh word, abused in different ways by the military as a society. I can tell you, and I always share this, my dad, while I was growing up, was this huge, tall man with a very strong voice, and like just looking at him, you would be terrified. But the second he saw just a military uniform, this 40-something old man would be so scared, because he still remember how he was bullied and how he was intimidated by the military when he was a young kid living in the war. And I'm talking about someone that was not a direct victim of the war. Now let's think about all of that other people that couldn't resolve that trauma, and that by this speech of let's harm those that are harming us, that in this case were the gang members, are they try to see, or I think they saw an opportunity there. I'm not saying I support that or that I am with that, but I guess more or less, at least to my perspective, that's how people initially thought they were going to be safe. And that's why this speech of our country is safe now initially started. And after that, and the aftermath of having, now the people that were, like I said, initially or consistently, I would say, harmed or systematically harmed and excluded, are now still being that. Because if you offered help, if you offered any sort of way out, they were going to take it without probably taking other considerations. And how were you supposed to know that things were going to turn that way? This is not, I'm not blaming the people. I'm blaming the person that manipulated those emotions through that trauma. And now, on the other hand, from what you were mentioning about Bitcoin, like I said, we work with small community organizations, and some of them have these small entrepreneurship, very, very small entrepreneurships. Most of them are just to activate the economy in the small communities. So one of the projects that we work with, it's for women, and out of the 4 of them, just one of them can read and write. So to us, it's a given that we can use our phones because we know how to write and we know how to read. Texting is writing, and then reading, you have all of your information here. How are these women they have a mill project, and they also send handcrafts? So initially it was said that anyone who sold anything should be able to accept Bitcoin. So let's not even go to how is someone that is living on $1 or $2 a day going to have one of these, a smartphone. Let's say they have it. How are they going to use it if they cannot read? How are they going to survive in that virtual reality if we as a society, if the government has not provided those tools as simple as reading and writing and doing math, in these things? These are beautiful things, these are tools if we see them like that, but if we can't read, if we can't write, they won't be useful to us. So I remember the fear in the eyes of these 4 women saying, how are we going to handle this? Just one of us can read and write. How is she going to communicate? How is she going to enter the platform, etc., etc. But yeah, I think that's my comment. I went on too long again, sorry.
You didn't go too long. We love listening to you. We're appreciative of your time and your energy and your passion and your labor. I have an article here that Sister Cities has shared with me, and there's a part of it that I find to be extremely interesting as well. So I'm just going to read it for everyone. Tens of thousands have been laid off since 2019. There's a movement of fired workers, also known as the MDT, which counted over 2,500 legislative employees, 3,800 city employees, and 14,000 central government institution employees have been laid off since the beginning of 2019. The people who have kept their jobs face state repression, and at least 16 public sector unionists have been arrested under the state of exception, many of them during disputes over unpaid salaries. So that's like a lot of city stuff going on. In the countryside, on the flip side, security forces have used the pretext of fighting gangs to lay siege to historic bastions of popular militancy and resistance, including liberation theology inspired Christian-based communities and repopulated towns that were resettled by organized refugees in liberated FMLN territory. And I just want to mention that the Santa Marta 5 are organizers from the Cabañas area that Julio referenced before. And so it goes on to say this one last piece that I want to share with you. Many of the survivors of previous generations state terror warn that militarization is a cover for land grabs, for extractive industries, and real estate development for coastal tourism. So I felt like those 2 paragraphs really summed up a lot of the impact both in rural and in city places about what was happening. What I love about the Romero community and COAR and La Isla del Espíritu Santo is that these are kind of autonomous communities. These are communities that are building dual power within, you know, an old system and then a new system and then an old system again. But they are really building, you know, the legs, the muscles for defending themselves, for educating themselves, for really creating a safe environment for themselves, which I find to be really inspiring. The island had no gang affiliation whatsoever because of the water that surrounded it, just the geographical region, or the geographical region that made it impossible for people without boats to come to the island. So they were spared from a lot of violence during the end of the Civil War. A lot of people who populate the island are refugees from the mainland, if you will, who fled violence during the Civil War. So that is something that sort of brings about some hope. I also really appreciate, Vicki, what you talked about with regard to immersion experiences, because I find that to be a very hopeful narrative shifting, truth telling. I'm wondering about 2 different things in particular, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. I'm wondering if anyone could tell us a little bit about women and trans and queer people are experiencing under the state of exception and how we accompany them. And I'm also wondering a little bit about how the state of exception is becoming a push factor for migration and how we can show solidarity when immigration is so often focused on Band-Aid solutions rather than the drivers and root causes of these things. So I know 2 really big topics, but if anyone it feels called or moved to go in one of those directions, that would be great. Julio?
Well, I didn't have time to talk. I have many friends and allies here in the trans community, but I didn't have time to see them because we were so busy. They feel the same insecurity because they have been targeted for a long time. And yes, I remember the first time we went with IRTF, that many of the trans activists say, well, we know that we are being followed and that we are going to be killed, and we ourselves say, and why did you do it? Because we have to do it. And it's still happening. I think they are part of the same insecurity that they can be taken at any moment, and they are not talking because they can be targeted.
In terms of
Women?
women, when we went to Cabañas, and it's in the militarized zone, so there will be checkpoints, so they'll have like trucks and military men just waiting, they can pull you over and things. I won't even say women, the girls we met who are in high school, who have to take buses to get to places. They don't like to go alone anymore because they get a lot of comments from the military men and they don't feel safe because they're being objectified and threatened by the men, because the military men are young men who have, no training, and now they have all this power over the whole area. And so the women feel that insecurity a lot. And that's just one personal experience I had with people.
Yeah, and I think to talk a little bit more about women in many Salvadoran families, it's the mother that holds things together when folks are emigrating, and many of the families that I know, it is the mom is the rock in that family, and when that woman is jailed or something happens that means that she can no longer be providing for her family, that affects not just her, but it affects her whole family. It affects her whole community, and in some cases, like Vicki was talking about the co-op that she works with, what happens with one of those women if she were to be taken, that affects everyone that she works with, and so the repercussions are much greater, I think, when a female, when a mom, when a breadwinner, who is also a child care provider, is rounded up.
Yeah, I think across Abya when women make money, it stays closer to their home and their community when it's circulated. They're spending money more often on survival necessities, and they're usually spending more close to home. So that also ripples into the community as well.
Thank you.
Do you all have any ideas about immigration? I don't know, Brian, if you want to chime in at all about some of our track record keeping around immigration and push factors.
Well, I can just chime in about the trends right now, and some of it might be post-COVID, or not post-COVID, but post initial shock of COVID, getting back to normal in the court. We've been tracking, with the assistance of a national database, the Cleveland Immigration Court, which is one of 69 courts across the United States. the numbers of people being put into new deportation proceedings, in other words, the government's finally like, oh, this person is here illegally, and DHS files a deportation proceeding. Those numbers have more than doubled compared to last year, as have the numbers of deportation orders being issued by Cleveland judges. Cleveland now ranks number 14 in the country of new deportation proceedings filed by the government. Cleveland ranks number 11 in terms of deportation orders being issued. The good news for Salvadorans is that those people really are not reflected in the high numbers, at least yet. And many of us here in this room know of the need to give permanent legal status to Salvadorans and others who are the quote beneficiaries of temporary protected status. That dates back to the 2000 earthquake. That's how long, 2001, thank you, earthquake, right? And those people have been in limbo all that time. So there's always efforts, you'll hear them from the national groups, you'll hear them from the IRTF, you'll hear them from COAR, from US El Salvador Sister Cities, to please continue to push to give permanent legal status to people who are in this limbo, and in the case of Salvadorans for the last 22 years. The numbers of other Central Americans reflected in those high rates that I started with, Guatemalans, Hondurans, yes, do top those lists of people being put into deportation proceedings, and people being issued deportation orders.
All right, this has been a lot of information. Yes, Erica.
Yeah, I just put a plug, on our trip, we, also with us was a woman, Nora Rodriguez, who is from El Salvador, and she fled at the start of the Civil War, and, had an experience in crossing the border, sort of changed her life, and she's been working at the border since then, and she has a group called Salvation. And she doesn't just work with Salvadorans, but she works with all migrants, so I just want to plug her, to look into that work too, because she also helps, because when people are deported back to El Salvador, these places, they often don't have reintegration services, so they're in the same position, maybe worse, because they've given all their money to try to cross the border, and now they don't have anything. So,
Yeah, it's really important. So this has been a lot of amazing context, and I know that you all might be overwhelmed with the amount of information, but I do just want to ask everyone before we turn it over to audience questions, one more thing, which is what does solidarity look like for you? From your positionality, and for Vicki, what do you hope to receive from people hoping to be in solidarity with you and your communities? And I'll start with the in-person folks and give Vicki a moment to think. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I think a big part of solidarity is understanding the very complex realities that folks are living in El Salvador right now. It's easy to say, you know, I went on a trip and I met someone, or I went on a delegation and we had these experiences, but yeah, like absolutely go on that delegation, meet those people, build those relationships, and go deeper into them. Don't let them be surface level relationships. Really try to understand a context, and then in terms of like support, you know, what are those people really struggling with? What are the people in the communities that you visit struggling with, and what do they think will help them? What support do they need to start a program, or what money do they need to fund a little startup business? And how can you listen to them? How can you be with them? How can you help them to change their own reality in a way that they see necessary. That's, for me, that is a huge component of solidarity, of understanding really what people are going through and what they need to help themselves, not in a like bootstraps kind of way, but in a way that really truly will help them to provide for their family, to become educated if that's what they need, to start to even think about making systemic change in their own society.
Yeah, so like, that empower, in a way that empowers them, but also in a way that is consent-based, right, driven by them.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, thank you. Julio, how can we be in solidarity with you, and how do you think that, how are you called to solidarity?
What I learned a while back is that whatever you can do physically and emotionally is very important. And then some people say that I am spreading too thin because I have the project in Guavita in Colombia, and I go to Honduras and I go to Salvador. But it's whatever I can at that moment, if the opportunity presents. Reality on physical support, I channel it through CIS because it has been very effective on what I see. And they develop these communities, which they are making an impact, and they're growing.
Erica, what does solidarity mean to you?
I think it's an always learning journey. And I think mostly what I know of solidarity, I learned from people in this room and people in this community who have brought me along. And to me, what they've instilled in me the most is the importance of the relationships and walking alongside people. And so, yeah, making those deeper relationships, not just I met this person and now I know their story and I'm going to tell their story to people, but finding a way to be in relationship in a supportive way that, yeah, we recognize our power in the different ways we have it. And listening, I don't know, just relationships.
Always about relationship. That's transformative power. I'm gonna turn it over to Vicky in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think I'm just gonna echo what everyone else said. I would also say it's a lot about accompanying and being in relationship with the people that you already know. I would also add, if possible, whenever possible, if you can come to El Salvador in any way and try to listen to that reality, that would be incredible. The other thing I would say, it's spread the word. My dad would probably kill me if he heard me saying this, but something that Bukele hates and fears the most, it's the opinion from the international public. So that's, and I'm sorry that I'm going to use this word, but that's a weapon. That is something that we can fight with. And this doesn't mean spreading the word in the US. This means if you have contacts outside the US, share what you know. The other thing I would add is keep on investigating, keep on reading, educate yourself as much as you can, not just on what's going on today, but also on our history, because at least personally, I believe that a lot of what it's going through, what it's happening right now and what we're going through right now has a huge root in our history and in our past. And if possible, I would also encourage you to keep these type of spaces. It's incredible what you're doing. It's such an important conversation, and I cannot stress enough the fact that even in my own circle, a lot of people don't want to have this conversation. either because they're scared, either because they don't care and they feel like it doesn't affect them, that this is such an important conversation to have. And I think it's even more important to keep on having it. Perhaps we won't have an immediate solution right now, but while we keep talking about it, we can continue to figure out other ways into how can we change this. So yeah, I think that would be it.
Sorry, I'm waiting for the thumbs up, just like you are. I completely agree, Vicky. Oh my goodness, yes. We have to keep talking. We have to keep trying. We have to keep struggling together in community for our collective liberation. I saw one hand on the audience. Are there any online questions as well? I'm gonna start with the online. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the question from online from Douglas Horner. Just wondering about visits from U.S. citizens. Are they helpful or do they put our friends in jeopardy and under more scrutiny?
Great. I'll take that one if you don't mind, Vicki. And because it reminds me of our call actually to action, which is the CEAS is going to be doing an election observation delegation in February and March. And these are probably the most important elections to observe since the beginning of, since after the war. And so I'm really grateful that CEAS is committed to continuing to do this. It was not always a certainty that they were going to be able to, get the government support to have the election observations, but there is a direct call from I think Vicki and International Partners in Mission, from Evelyn and CEAS and Leslie to come and to actually support, because they actually need an international presence to make those election observations happen, because we can't vote in the election. We're an unbiased opinion. It's one of the only forms of actual direct service that IRTF engages in. I see a question here. I'll turn it over to Francis and then to Kim.
Something important that we could say, and it's true, that the reason they approve the international elections observing is because the opinion that we provide, it brings a little bit of legitimacy to Buchanan. I think he's very concerned about that.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. Francis.
Yeah, in view of the fact that one of the hottest political issues of the United States is the immigration crisis, how are we not making the connection between authoritarian governments and corporations that are driving this exodus in the United States? And with all this injustice that's going on, we're sending a position to the State Department, which is great, but it seems to be more needs to be made of this. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that.
Do you have a question that you want to state in there though? I only heard comments.
Yeah, how do we amplify this message?
How do we amplify this message? It's really important. I want to turn it over to folks online. If Vicki or even Zoma or Evelyn want to share.
We just posted the question in the chat because they couldn't hear our audio.
They couldn't hear our audio?
The mic is too far.
Oh, okay, the mic is too far. So,
they have it in the chat. So Vicki, let us know if you want to respond to that. She's reading the chat.
why don't we take the other question at the same time so that
Yes, I'd like to take up a lot of this. The history is crucial. I want to ask anybody here heard National Public Radio this morning edition?
would you be getting closer to the mic?
Oh, sure.
Thanks.
Where do I speak?
Just right here, yeah.
Did anybody hear National Public Radio this morning edition about Cortez? There were the academics on, and they talked about the massacre of 1521 when Cortez wiped out the Native Americans in Mexico City. And that's where I want to take off with solidarity, because I think this is a matter of the illegal immigrants are not illegals. They are Native Americans who have their roots in the Western Hemisphere, and the rest of us are settler colonialists. And as far as Christie, she has actually lived the solidarity. I went to IRTF when Tamir Rice was murdered, and they sang, it's the only place I heard sung, "We Shall Overcome." And so there was that. Was anybody else there at that meeting? That was wonderful. And then Brian, at one of our big Cleveland Peace Action meetings, the best workshop was when Brian brought one of your members and Al Porter of Black on Black Crime in to make movement songs. And so people were writing songs. Brian, do you remember that? Who was the woman that, there was a woman from IRTF that was the other songwriter.
Yeah.
And she was, I think, LGBT, and she was looking from that perspective. So, but and we haven't mentioned the true gangsters who were in 1980 and then in 1980 and then 2016. First, Reagan put us in crisis, and then Trump put us in crisis. And nobody's mentioned the true gangsters, the gangsters of Wall Street, who Smedley Butler identified. And this is where the problem is here. So how do we build solidarity here among the groups? Christie has come to our Palestinian.
You can call me C.
What, C?
C, yeah.
I don't know. C, you have showed up to the Palestinian human rights solidarity protests, and you've seen that. And then we had an indigenous people meeting the other night where the Palestinians spoke of themselves as indigenous people, and Philip Yenyo from the American Indian movement came and identified with the Palestinians. The same thing happened at Standing Rock, where Black Lives Matter and Palestinians went there. So I think our problem has not been discussed tonight yet. How do we bring the people here in Cleveland together in solidarity to go and speak truth to power as a group of diverse people from different silos, because we stay in our silos. If we get out of our silos and make a coalition, we show up together, and that's how we speak truth to power. And I think that's what we need to be talking about, is strategy of how we join each other. It's mentioned relationships, all that, but we haven't talked about our relationships here. I wish that that was the main agenda tonight at this meeting, talking strategy of how we are going to grow our movement here, where we're in the belly of the beast. And the beast is the one with Smedley Butler, the gangster of Wall Street, who admitted, and this has gone on since, when was Smedley Butler? 1900 plus or minus. He was invading all of these countries as a Marine, colonel, general or colonel, whatever, and he overthrew all the governments that put in place the dictators who we are complaining about today. I went to the funeral for the two sisters religious at St. John's Cathedral. Could barely get in because it was standing room only, and it broke my heart. My friend Bob Greenbaum took us from Catholic Commission Community Action with Sister Mary Hurley, if you remember her, anybody?
Of course we do.
Okay, she inspired us with.
She's still inspiring us.
Wow, well, I mean, the inspiration, she stood with us on nuclear power at the time. But we did the Stations of the Cross around the federal building. That's where the power is. And today they shut down one of the places yesterday in New York City.
Yeah, we were there.
The climate change thing.
Yeah.
There is some solidarity. Shut down a government office by turning out so many people. We sent, I'm going on too much, but I'm really wonderful.
I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds.
Let me just, we put 1 million people in New York City in 1980 for the disarmament protest, and that may have stopped the nuclear arms race, and that was against Reagan. So think about how we're going to stop Reagan and how we're going to stop Trump, and finally how we're going to stop Biden and the Ukraine war, because that's putting us in jeopardy of nuclear holocaust. So we have a couple jobs to do.
We have a lot of jobs to do and not too much time left. I will try to answer that. Oh,
Well,
I'll
I
let you-
have, when you start talking about history, we just,
Settler
celebrated.
colonialism.
Well, but again, I am 30% Native Colombian, so I speak with experience.
You're not an illegal immigrant.
That's right.
But to say when I came, they needed me because they needed doctors, so I was legal in a way. But 50 years ago, Kissinger and Nixon killed Allende and put Pinochet in. But it has been since the beginning. Every single dictator in Latin America has been placed by the United States. And unfortunately, Kelly is maintained by the United States. So I think that part is very important.
I just want one thing. Hugo Chavez was the first Native American president from the Western Hemisphere. And what happened to him? They tried to kidnap him, and the people rose up and put him back in power. So Hugo Chavez should be our inspiration, along with Allende, as to how to fight the power.
Thank you.
I'm done.
It is important that we really build coalitions. And the way that I will try to answer this as quickly as possible is that, yes, in the beginning of our rapid response network, we, in 1987, we used to really see that the main drivers of violence, physical violence against human beings and bodies, were the militaries and the governments themselves. And over the years, we see more and more and more clearly just how much multinational corporations, with being having the U.S. government in their back pocket, are really pushing and driving the massive the massive violence, physical violence that is being oppressed on different peoples. And that's why we say no war but class war. But we are very, very interested in operating as an ecology, as an ecological system, remembering that we are not separate from nature, but that we are actually a part of nature ourselves. We contain worlds and multitudes. There's microbiomes all over our bodies. And we are the microbiomes on the face of Mother Earth. And we exist interdependently. Although we are autonomous beings, we exist interdependently. And so we need to make time and space to support each other. Does that mean that we will be at every single action? No, but thank goodness that there are people to step in and out of these things, and we still have to commit faithfully to what I call the cross-pollination of our movements, because when we operate in silos, then we're really not gaining the strength and wisdom of not only our elders, but of the people who are experts at their own lives, at how to resist within their own communities, at how to, at what it is that they need, right? As we talked about solidarity, we are the experts in our own lives, and so we have to remember that when we think about consent and empowerment and all of these beautiful things that we've talked about. It's not gonna be easy. It's going to be a lifetime struggle, I've noticed, and I know that it's not a marathon it's a marathon and not a sprint. And at the same time, there is an urgency that I do fear what the world looks like after 2024, and we can't get complacent within because we can see that state violence and fascism continues to grow, and it's been explained to me that fascism is really imperialism that's been turned in on itself. It is domestic form of domination and control that we need to resist. And so we have to encourage each other, disagree in love and comradeship, right? You're not gonna agree with every single thing that every single person has to say. There are only permanent issues that we have to fight for, and hopefully we will unite around that. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. I'm so grateful to say that we had nearly 40 people in person and online together. joining us for this conversation. If you'd like to get involved in the Santa Marta case with U.S. El Salvador sister cities and IRTF, we would love to have your involvement. If you would like to go on a delegation, I know that there's many groups that would welcome you, especially CEAS. And I just want to thank one more time COAR Peace Mission, the Centro de Intercambio y Solidaridad. Hey Evelyn, we love you. Mary Ober and Ready Fair Trade, Cleveland Peace Action, Francis, Dawn, Chantal, thank you all so much. COAR Peace Action, Revi, and Emma, and our amazing tech team with Bogdan. We are all really repping lots of different communities pretty hard here, but yes, thank you so much, and stay safe and stay dangerous, and we'll see you in the streets. Thank you so much, Vicki. You're incredible. Can't wait to see you in person someday. Thank you, Doug, for that invitation. Online folks, if you're still there, if you want to come on camera, if anyone is willing to join us around the screen, we'll take a quick picture. Very quickly. Like, they'll come on screen and we will stay on the camera. Solomon, would you mind taking the photo? Oh, it's so great to see you. Doug, we can't see you. Are you there, Doug?
Hang on.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Hello. Yeah. Yes. All right, gather round.
Okay, we're gonna count down.
10, 9, 8.
Go, there you go, guys.
Are you unwilling to be in it?
Matt, do you want to be in?
Come on, Pat.
Obviously not.
All right, first we're looking at Bogdan, straight
But if
ahead.
we can squeeze the walk.
Yeah. People in the back. Oh, yeah. Looking at Bogdan, 5, 4, 3.
2, 1.
And now, looking to our right, to Solomon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really good job. Wait,
You want to swap it?
No, we're not, okay, wait.
One more.
One picture.
Hold on one second.
3, 2, 1.
Any more than that? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
No.